Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office over allegations he shared confidential information with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. President Trump gathers his Board of Peace members who meet for the first time to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza. And the former president of South Korea, Yoon, is sentenced to life in prison after an attempt to impose military rule. Now, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Police carried out searches at the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, as well as an address in Berkshire. The former prince is accused of sharing confidential material with late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. King Charles says it was with the deepest concern he had learnt about the arrest of his younger brother, adding that the law must take its course. Let's get the latest with Royal Commentator Afua Hagan, who is in London. Afua, great to have you on the show. It's been a busy day today. What's the latest on Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, who remains in police custody following an earlier arrest?
A busy day, certainly, and quite a birthday for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Today is his 66th birthday. And of course, he has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Now, there was photographers stationed outside at Sandringham today because it's his birthday, perhaps expecting a visit from family members. But instead, what they got was the police turning up, unmarked police cars, detectives getting out, and a search taking place at Sandringham. Now, we don't know the whereabouts of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor at the moment, but what we do know is Thames Valley Police did have that complaint against him and acted on that complaint. We heard that earlier on this week, they were having discussions as to perhaps how they were going to take this case forward, and they decided that today would be the day that they would arrest Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Now, he wasn't arrested by appointment, and by that I mean he had no prior warning that today's arrest was going to take place. So he was taken by surprise, so to speak, that the arrest took place today. Like I said, his whereabouts are unknown, but the police do have 24 hours in which to question him about question him about what he is accused of, and that is misconduct in public office. And we do have to say that it's just an arrest at the moment. He hasn't been charged of anything.
And His Majesty the King released a statement following the news that his younger brother Andrew has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, like you were just telling us, Sophia. This was a pretty swift response from the royals. And what impact will this have on the royal family?
Yes, a very swift response from the King, in fact. Only maybe a couple of hours after Andrew was arrested, we got this statement, a very terse statement, I must say. He referred to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, didn't refer to him as his brother at all, said that he wants to follow the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner by the appropriate authorities, saying that they have his full and wholehearted support and cooperation, saying that the law must take its course, and then saying that he won't be saying anything further. A very harsh statement, I think, one that very much distances himself from Andrew, which is what he wants. With what effect this will have on the royal family, when we had Queen Camilla out earlier on today in Westminster, we had King Charles III, who has just arrived at London Fashion Week to launch London Fashion Week for the very first time, I might add. But all reporters wanted to know, and all they asked him about, was the arrest of his brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. And so it's fair to say that this is casting a very very, very long shadow over the royal family, and it has done for some time.
And this is a key moment in the story regarding the Epstein files, and a key moment of those being named and affected by the Epstein files. Andrew has always denied any wrongdoing, but what is he under investigation for?
So this is suspected misconduct in public office, right? And this refers to the time when Andrew was a trade envoy on behalf of the United Kingdom government. So that was a public office that he was elected to. And this is about Andrew's conduct in that time, and more pointedly about emails that he sent to Jeffrey Epstein about the work he was doing while he was a trade envoy. And there's two particular emails that he sent, both in late 2010. One was just after he'd taken a trip to Asia, and he was given details of that trip, or given a summary of that trip by an assistant. And 5 minutes later, he sent that email to Jeffrey Epstein. There was another email that he sent him in December 2010, and that linked to Afghanistan and the regeneration of Helmand province. He had details on that and forwarded that to Jeffrey Epstein as well. So it's all about whether he sent government secrets and government official information to someone who wasn't in government, namely Jeffrey Epstein, so he could benefit from that information. And that amounts to, or the police want to find out, they're now assessing through speaking to him over the next 24 hours, whether that amounts to misconduct in public office. Now, we have to say that misconduct in public office, that charge is a very high threshold to meet. It's very difficult to prove that, to prove that someone willfully, deliberately, and not just mistakenly and because of bad judgment, but actually because of bad conduct, sent information or gave someone information while they were in public office so the other person could benefit. It can be quite hard to prove that.
And we have also received a statement from the family of Virginia Giuffre, who alleged Andrew had sex with her when she was 17 years old and claimed she had been trafficked by Epstein. This is a moment for the survivors when it comes to the Epstein files. What has her family said?
That's right. We did have a statement from Amanda Roberts, Sky and Amanda Roberts, and Danny and Lynette Wilson, who posted a statement on Facebook. And they said, "At last today, our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty." And you're absolutely right in saying that this is a moment for Virginia Giuffre, for her family, and for survivors who have long said that nobody has been prosecuted in any way, shape, or form for anything that happened in the Epstein files. Now they feel that because Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested, even though it's not anything to do with Virginia Giuffre, that the arrest has been made on suspicion of misconduct in public office and nothing to do with Virginia Giuffre or sex trafficking. They do feel that for them, this serves some sort of justice.
And in a statement, Thames Valley Police said officers were carried out searches at addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk, as you did mention, in relation to Andrew. But I think the main question here is, what happens next?
Well, at the moment, the custody clock is ticking. Like I said, police have 72 hours, police have 24 hours to question Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. That can be extended if need be. Then they will decide if a charge will be brought. I don't think they will decide that at this case, because it's likely that Andrew probably will give no comment in his interviews. And then after that, it's up to the forensic and digital work that will be done in those searches. And I believe that they will be searching for things like laptops, hard drives, computers, anything that could potentially have that information that was sent from Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor to Jeffrey Epstein, they will be looking for that evidence. And then there'll be the police decision once they have that evidence. Will they charge him? Will they let him out on bail? Will they release him under investigation? So I think it really depends on what happens when they search those properties, what they find from those properties, and that will guide them as to how much further they will go with this.
And Afua, what's the feeling on the ground in the UK today after the arrest of Andrew? Because I remember I covered the death of Queen Elizabeth. I was outside Buckingham Palace, and the royals always draw so much attention. But what is a case like this drawing the crowds, or are people just outraged?
You know, you're absolutely right in saying the royals always draw lots of attention. Lots of people are gathering outside Buckingham Palace, actually, at the moment. And lots of people that I've spoken to today, first of all, saying, gosh, they never thought this would happen. But even though it has happened, they're not sure if anything will actually come from this arrest. There still seems to be quite a lot of scepticism around at the moment as to whether this will see Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor charged or on trial or in prison. At the moment, it's just an arrest. There's no charges. This is just the beginning, absolutely, in this. But a lot of people thinking to themselves, OK, he has been arrested, but what will actually come of this?
Afua Hagan, thank you so much for your analysis and your time with us today. Representatives from President Trump's Board of Peace have met today to discuss the reconstruction and stabilization of Gaza. Members have pledged $5 billion to help rebuild the war-torn region. Trump says the board has the greatest leaders in the world, and it has a chance to be the most consequential board ever assembled. Take a listen.
I believe it's the most consequential board, certainly in terms of power. And in terms of prestige, there's never been anything close, because these are the greatest world leaders. This is the most prestigious board ever put together. You know, I've seen some great corporate boards. I've seen some great boards, period. It's peanuts compared to this board.
Let's continue this conversation with Nomi Bar-Yaacov, an international peace negotiator at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy. Nomi, great to have you on the show. Before we get into Trump's Board of Peace, he's just told us there how consequential it is. I just want to ask you a question on Iran, because Trump says we'll know in the next 10 days if a US-Iran deal is possible. However, reports today signal a US strike on Iran could happen as soon as Saturday. Are we likely to see an escalation in the coming days?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show, Leigh-Ann. It's always a pleasure. Iran is very serious. Of course, we know from the past that President Trump may sort of hit under the belt. Last time during the attacks on Iran, his attack on Iran, they were in the middle of negotiating with the Iranian delegation in Oman. So when he says 10 days, of course, there is the fear that the US will strike as early as Saturday, as you said. I think the only person who knows is President Trump himself, but there is certainly a very serious buildup in the region. We've seen F-25s, F-22s, F-16s, vast numbers of them fly across, carried across. You've got an unprecedented military power, US military power in the Gulf. So all eyes are on what they're going to do. So tricky. Of course, he was waiting for this meeting today, the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace, before doing anything. But I think we do need to be extremely alert. Certainly the feeling, I'm in London, but I know from colleagues and sources in Israel that the feeling there that this weekend is going to be absolutely critical. So certainly there is serious fear that something could happen very soon.
Thank you for your thoughts on that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Board of Peace, which Donald Trump told us was very consequential. And he also says more than $7 billion has been contributed towards Gaza's relief effort. What can Trump's Board of Peace realistically achieve?
Well, that's an excellent question, Leigh-Ann. I don't think anyone really knows. I think the vision of President Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is rather different to the vision of the members on the board. Of course, the members, especially those from the Middle East, would like to see a peaceful solution. They would like to see a Palestinian state. They would like to see the Palestinians free. But there was no talk of ending the occupation. Israel currently occupies 53% of the Gaza Strip. There was no talk of how long they're going to occupy that for and what is the timeline going to be, what are the benchmarks going to be for withdrawal. He did speak about security first. So I think $7 billion isn't that much money if you don't know where it's going, what it's going to go towards. And I think it's not at all clear how that money is going to be used. And that's my main concern, is that the plans that we have seen are rather removed from the reality on the ground. We have not seen any talk of accountability. We have not seen any structure that is going to work. And of course, the key question is Palestinian agency. We have seen Israelis on the board. We have not seen the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian technocratic government given the power that they need in order to work this out. There isn't an international solution. We know that from experience to the conflict. There has to be both Palestinian and Israeli engagement. And at present, it's not looking particularly pretty.
And with several key US allies declining to participate in the Board of Peace, is Trump's new initiative strengthening America's global leadership, or is it risking a direct challenge with the UN because so many countries like the UK and European countries have been really questioning the Board of Peace?
Yes, I think it is questionable. You have all the power is lying with the chairman. The chairman is the US president, Donald Trump. He has the power to dismiss anyone from the board. Certainly, if they don't pay the $1 billion he's asked for in the first year, then they do not have automatic membership. You can see from the countries that have joined, those of the volunteered forces to the International Stabilization Force, they're not countries that have any experience in peacekeeping, but they're countries that need the US on their side. So there's more politics than there is peace in this particular issue. For example, you mentioned Iran earlier in a different context, but what about the human rights of Nobel Peace Laureate Narges Mohammadi? She's we know from the Nobel Peace Committee that she's been tortured very, very badly. They said last week that there's serious risk to her life, given the beatings that she is enduring. Maybe this is the role of the Board of Peace, to ensure that that human rights are also adhered to. So lots of questions, and I would say more questions than answers about the process of how we're going to get to peace in Gaza, in the Middle East. And ultimately, I think this Board of Peace is meant to, at least according to the Charter, deal with peace globally.
Nomi Bar-Yaacov, thank you so much for your time and analysis.
My pleasure.
We can now go live to Tel Aviv to speak to former Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy. Eylon, great to have you on the show. I was just speaking to Nomi a little bit earlier, and I just wanted to get your perspective on Iran, because the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is warning of an unprecedented response if Iran attacks, and Trump hinting at military action. Is the region on the brink of a major Israel-Iran confrontation?
I hope President Trump is able to force the Iranians into an agreement that will end the Islamic Republic's aggression in the Middle East. I hope that they look at those American warships and agree that now is the time to permanently end the nuclear weapons program, the long-range ballistic missiles, and their support for proxy armies that have brought chaos across the Middle East. But I'm not optimistic that the Iranians are going to do that. In fact, we've seen the very aggressive move of closing the Straits of Hormuz during negotiations with the Americans, publicly rebuffing the idea there can be any deal on ballistic missiles, as Iran suggesting that they're not willing to do that. So the Americans are saying, well, maybe Iran has made a little bit of progress, but they're not even acknowledging America's other red lines. And I think the Israeli perspective is, Obviously, we want diplomacy to succeed in ending that threat of Iranian aggression. But the absolute worst outcome would be a return to some form of JCPOA that lifts sanctions on Iran, allows the regime to enrich itself just at the time that it is trying to rebuild that machinery of regional hegemony.
And let's move on to the Board of Peace, if we can. Thanks, Eylon, for answering that question. Why is Israel's involvement in the Board of Peace significant and important at this time?
Well, at the end of the day, the conflict between Hamas and Israel can only be resolved if it ends the threat that Hamas poses to Israeli civilians and people inside Israel. If you want to rebuild Gaza, stocks are going to have to go through Israeli crossings. If you want to build the Gazan economy, it's going to have to be through a connection to the Israeli economy. Israel is very supportive of President Trump's plan. It sees a framework that will deliver the disarmament of Hamas, the demilitarization of Gaza, the de-radicalization of the population. And let's remember, those were Israel's goals in the war that Hamas declared on October 7th to begin with. The question now is whether the Trump plan can deliver that. It has laid out a very optimistic vision of what Gaza can look like if it chooses disarmament, demilitarization, and de-radicalization. But it says phase 2 is dependent, it's conditional on Hamas fully and immediately disarming. And it's not doing that. In fact, there was a report in the BBC today about how Hamas is taxing merchants in cash in order to reassert control in the Gaza Strip. And it looks like it sees this period simply as a time to regroup for the next confrontation with Israel. So Israel is happy to support the development of the Gaza Strip if the people there choose that they want to live in peace next to Israel. But otherwise, Israel's message is very clear. Hamas Gaza cannot be allowed to rebuild as a base for a terrorist army that wants to invade and take hostages again.
So, Eylon, it's quite interesting because Donald Trump was talking at the Board of Peace earlier, and he said it looks like Hamas will be getting rid of their weapons, but we have to find out. So Donald Trump did really strike an optimistic tone when it came to Hamas demilitarizing, but did caveat that with we have to find out. But with Trump declaring that Gaza is no longer a hotbed of radicalism and terror, what evidence supports that claim, and how might this reshape Iran's policy towards Gaza?
I have not seen any evidence that the Gaza Strip is no longer a hotbed of radicalism.
Well, that's what Trump said, Eylon.
Well, if President Trump has said that, I would be curious to know what that is based on. The fact is that half of the Gaza Strip is still controlled by the Hamas regime that thinks dragging the Middle East into war on October 7th was a good idea. And if we want to have permanent, peaceful reconstruction, the path has to go through de-radicalization. That's point 1 of the Trump peace plan, that there must be de-radicalization. Because otherwise, even if Hamas relinquishes power, we're just going to end up with another government that wants to rebuild Gaza as a launchpad for jihad and war against Israel. And we don't want that. We want to live in peace next to our neighbors in Gaza. And that means there has to be real de-radicalization.
And several close US partners, including the UK, France, Norway and Sweden, have declined to join the Board of Peace, and that's due to questions about neutrality if Israel is a member, while Palestinian representation appears extremely limited. What do you make of this, Eylon?
I think the countries that are declining to join the Board of Peace have questions about the board's broader global role and its efforts to try to circumvent the United Nations. These are countries that are very committed to the existing international institutions and don't want to support an organization that could be seen as a rival. The fact is that with the Board of Peace on the ground, the job of governing Gaza is supposed to be through this National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, which is a board of Palestinian technocrats. That's a government in exile. They're not actually in Gaza right now. I think they're probably quite afraid to go into Gaza because Hamas has made clear it will not relinquish power and it's not giving up their arms. But that is a positive vision. Gaza should be governed by people who want to build it permanently and peacefully, and do not see it as a launch pad for attacks against Israel. Do not see it as a temporary staging ground for refugees until they can immigrate into Israel. And I think that's an effort that needs to be supported. But that can only happen if Hamas is disarmed. And that's the elephant in the room that unfortunately no one is addressing. For all the billions of dollars the US wants to pour into Gaza, and the countries that are willing to send soldiers for an international stabilization force, none of that is going to happen if Hamas continues to regroup, rearm, and refuses to relinquish control.
Eylon, just a quick and final thought from you. Do you think that the US partners who don't want to be part of this board of peace are concerned about the future two-state solution and Israel's occupation of the West Bank?
Look, Israel's position is that if Israel had withdrawn from the West Bank in the same way it had withdrawn from the Gaza Strip in 2005, we would have seen October 7th coming from the mountains over Tel Aviv on a much larger scale. The October 7 massacre and the celebrations that it elicited within Palestinian society convinced Israelis that the Palestinians do not want to live in peace next to Israel. Their ultimate goal is one Palestinian state from the river to the sea. And the world needs to understand that as long as the Palestinian goal, the Palestinian cause, remains the destruction of the state of Israel, Israelis are not going to make concessions that they view as suicidal, as an existential risk. So if we want to move forward towards peace, we have to get serious about Palestinian radicalization and the root cause of the conflict, which remains the Palestinian refusal to accept a Jewish state within any borders whatsoever. If we can solve that, I'm sure it's possible to move towards a future of peace.
Eylon Levy, always good to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Leigh-Ann.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The UK Foreign Minister has condemned the detention of a British couple in Tehran. Yvette Cooper called the detention of Craig and Lindsay Foreman totally unjustifiable. Iran accuses the duo of gathering information. They've been held for over 13 months for espionage, a charge they deny. Investigators in the US are in touch with Mexican authorities about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The search for the mother of American news anchor Savannah Guthrie continues into the third week. A toxic gas leaked at a mine in Nigeria has killed 37 people and hospitalized 26 others. A preliminary probe has revealed that a sudden discharge of lead oxide and gases like sulfur and carbon monoxide led to the deaths. It's not clear whether the mine was operating legally, but it has been closed pending an investigation. And Bill Gates has pulled out of the AI summit in India amid controversies over the Epstein files. The Microsoft's co-founded charity organization confirmed that he would not continue with his scheduled address at the Delhi event. Delegates from more than 100 countries, including several world leaders, are now in attendance. The White House has warned Iran they'd be very wise to make a deal with the US. American media previously reported a US strike could take place as early as this weekend. Addressing reports, White House Press Secretary Caroline Levitt said the president was still hoping for a diplomatic resolution with Tehran. Take a listen.
The president has always been very clear, though, with respect to Iran or any country around the world, diplomacy is always his first option, and Iran would be very wise to make a deal with President Trump and with this administration. He's talking to many people, of course, his national security team, first and foremost, and you know who the members of that team are. And this is something, obviously, the president takes seriously. He's always thinking about what's in the best interest of the United States of America, of our military, of the American people, and that's how he makes decisions with respect to military action of any kind.
I'm now joined by Erol Morkoç, a spokesperson for Republicans overseas. So, Erol, what is it? Diplomacy, 10 days notice, or a strike at the weekend?
Well, I would say that clarity itself isn't aggression. We have put very clear red lines on the situation. You can't obtain nuclear weapons. You're not going to be able to affect trade routes, and you're certainly not going to put American people or service members' lives at risk. Those are hard red lines. Regardless of regional stability, this is a show of force. And it's a show of force, especially because the F-22 Raptors have been forward deployed. And this is an American-only plane. This is what escorts the B-2 bombers. This is a absolute strike aircraft, not an F-35. This is to take down any remaining forces. You have so many tankers, so much naval power there. And then you go back and you look at what we did in Venezuela. And Maduro, he called our bluff. And what happened to him? We picked him up and plucked him out of there. Now, would it be quite the same situation in Tehran? No, I don't think so. But do they want to find that out? Do they really want to play a game with a man who has the capability to do this on multiple fronts? And as you saw, the Iranian president come out and say, China effectively has abandoned us. They promised to finance this, finance that. Iran is encircled. Every one of their enemies, by the way, it's not just America who's rooting for this to happen. And from Ankara to Tel Aviv to anywhere, people are eagerly waiting for the fall of this regime. So the only chance they have here is to make a deal. And if they don't make a deal, I think President Trump is going to strike them hard and quick. And it's going to be one of the most revolutionary changes, because that will preeminate the fall of Cuba. And we would have had Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela go down within about 90 days.
Let's talk about Iran, Erol, because Iran is insisting it has the legal right to nuclear enrichment, and Trump warning of potential strikes. Are we witnessing a diplomatic standoff at the moment? And what can bring this deadlock to an end? You said Iran making a deal, but it appears that Iran thinks they're within their right for nuclear enrichment for domestic purposes.
They probably are in their right if we trusted them. If they were the type of people who were enriching uranium for domestic purposes, they, of course, wouldn't be enriching it to 60%. There's no reason to enrich to that amount. Certainly, they would have had certain other capabilities they would be building, maybe nuclear submarines, but they're using diesel submarines. Very clearly, their entire situation is to create enough nuclear material to have a counterbalance threat against Israel and on the region. And when you look at the clerical 12er Shia Islam and the Armageddon-style sort of diplomacy that they're conducting, you have to be very conscious of what they are bringing to the table. And their requests for a civilian program, once again, are valid if we trusted them. We don't trust them. We think they're lying. And if they're not going to surrender the remaining nuclear material, I think that we will have no choice but to go in and remove them.
The US, as you did mention to me, has moved around 50 extra fighter jets and other aircraft towards the Middle East this week. As Donald Trump said, that Armada is on its way, and we've seen a lot of it arriving there. What are Trump's military options in Iran? Reports suggest the US could try to influence government change from the air. What else could possibly be on the table?
Well, complete air supremacy is guaranteed, but more importantly, what can we do on the ground? It's much better that this comes from an internal situation. Are there people inside Iran who are willing to step up and do what's right to overthrow the yoke of the tyranny they've been under since the Islamic Revolution? If so, can we find those people? Can we work with them? CIA, Mossad already is in the country, has been operating in the country very long. You have a situation where half the country is not half, nearly is secular minded, and so it's not very hard to find allies inside that situation. The last thing we want, though, is a large-scale invasion of troops on the ground. This would be a situation where we are taking out top-level leadership and or allowing them to flee to safe haven. But it's coming down to the wire, and right now, unless Iran is really going to step into negotiations, I think that they might entrench themselves and try to hold out, and that's going to be the end of them.
Erol, I have a good friend who's from Iran, and we met over the weekend and we were talking, and her sister lives in Tehran. And she tells me the stories that her sister tells her about what's happening in Tehran, but she's so frightened, the sister, on the phone, that they have to speak in code. It's very difficult for the people in Iran at the moment after that crackdown due to those anti-government protests, which Donald Trump said help was on its way. And it never came for those people. And it's very difficult for the people of Iran to keep on going and keep on striking because they know the consequences are so deadly.
That's very true. And, I think anybody with a heart goes out to that situation. President Trump certainly felt that he came as close as he could regarding maybe stopping the execution of hostages. I think clearly that didn't go far enough. And those people were left kind of in the wind there. And that certainly wasn't something that was a good situation. So I'm not here to defend every single thing that the policy decision that we make on the fly. Those words were taken perhaps in a more literal sense. As we're coming later on with the Armada, though, we can say, look, help is on the way. Perhaps we were presumptuous in hoping that you would have overthrown that government in that time period. Also, the crackdown that occurred, I mean, it sounds kind of, heartless, but that does further delegitimize the government. So I think the most important thing here for American officials and American people when looking at this is that the Iranian people are our friends. The Iranian people are victims of the situation. Even if they're not victims, we are not trying to kill civilians or anything. What we're trying to do is remove the threat of nuclear war in the region, remove potentially one of the biggest sponsors of state terrorism in the region. And that can be done with precision accuracy. So I think the Armada is coming. That help is coming. Did we come up a little bit short on that situation? Yes, absolutely. And to your friend and her family, that's a failure on our part. We definitely need to own that. But it doesn't mean that America has given up or will give up on this situation. I think President Trump is proving that with the current show of force and or potential strikes this weekend.
Erol Morkoç, great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
A South Korean court has sentenced former President Yoon Yeol to life in prison after finding him guilty of masterminding an insurrection. The court said the action gravely damaged the political neutrality of the military and police and damaged the country's credibility on the world stage. Frank Smith reports from Seoul.
The bus believed to be carrying South Korea's ex-president arrived at Seoul Central District Court as his supporters demonstrated outside. This banner reading, "Stay strong, Mr. President." There was heightened security also. Today's verdict was the most consequential for the ousted leader. Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty. But the court opted for life imprisonment instead after finding him guilty of leading an insurrection, noting that while the crime was grave, Yoon had attempted to limit the use of physical force when he declared martial law more than a year ago.
South Korean citizens have been so deeply polarized, pitted against each other. I really think it should have been a death sentence so that this doesn't become an example to repeat. Martial law must never be allowed.
One of the judges presiding over the case said Yoon attempted to send troops to the National Assembly to blockade the Assembly Hall and arrest key figures, including the Assembly Speaker and party leaders, to prevent lawmakers from gathering to deliberate or vote. The verdict makes Yoon the first elected head of state in South Korea's democratic era to receive the maximum custodial sentence. His legal team says the court ignored the principle of basing findings on evidence.
If this ruling ignores the clearly established facts as well as the legal principles and evidentiary standards set forth in our Constitution and the Criminal Procedure Act and simply mirrors the conclusions predetermined by the special counsel, then were the dozens of hearings held over the past year merely procedural formalities?
Yoon's lawyers say they will discuss whether or not to appeal the verdict. Former President Yoon can also appeal for a presidential pardon, but the ruling caps one of South Korea's most turbulent political crises, with the scars likely to last for years to come. Frank Smith, Al Arabiya English.
A reminder of our top stories. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office over allegations he shared confidential information with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. President Trump gathers his Board of Peace members who meet for the first time to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza. And the former president of South Korea, Yoon Yeol, is sentenced to life in prison after an attempt to impose military rule. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X, We'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.